What's going on, everybody? Grady here for another video, and today we're going to be talking about something that I have not touched on in any of my videos, and that is my love for motorcycles. I know that cars are, of course, a part of my life. They're something that I have absolutely loved to death, as well as my love for watches, which hopefully you've checked out some of my more recent videos. But this is something that's very near and dear to me that I just never really felt ready to talk about, and that I just wanted to allow myself some time to get a little bit more familiarized with everything and really feel like the industry is a part of my life, and so that I can talk about it in a way that it doesn't feel forced. It just is me talking to you guys. So I thought I would outline this with a little bit of a history lesson on, well, a little bit of a background on my journey with the motorcycles that I've had. And it really begins with one of the most basic forms of motorized transportation, and that is a moped. I had a Honda Ruckus, actually. It was something that my family had, and growing up, I would use that to go around town in, especially, and this was kind of the big turning point for me, was during COVID, during lockdown and everything. Well, what would I do in the meantime? I would just cruise around in circles on two wheels because I didn't really have much else going on at that point. And when I was out on those two wheels there, with my goofy little helmet and a little stereo speaker strapped to the front of it to listen to music, I was out one time and a big group of motorcyclists came ripping by, and I just thought that was the coolest thing ever. It just sparked something in me, and I'll never forget riding back, and I looked back and I went, you know what? How fun would that be to experience two wheels with a little bit more, authenticity, we'll call it, for motorcycling. And so I went on the search for my first bike, and I found myself a 1985 Honda Rebel, one of the most quintessential beginner motorcycles of all time, right? Found that about 30 minutes north of my home here, and gentleman who was selling it just wanted to liquidate his collection and find himself just with something, just wanted to get that out of his life, right? And I got that motorcycle, although it was definitely way too small for me. Didn't really do much homework in regards to seating positions, and I didn't know how to do it. I mean, at the time, it was way bigger than a moped, but man, looking back, that thing was miniature. So I rode that around for a little while, and then I got a little bit more comfortable with riding. I wanted to experience a little bit more of a different powertrain, and one of my friends had a 4-cylinder motorcycle, an old Honda CB650, and so I went and got myself a 1980 Suzuki GS550L, which I decided that at that point, considering I had absolutely no experience wrenching or riding motorcycles, is that I would wrench and ride motorcycles with something like that. I've spent most of the summer trying to rebuild it. Emphasis on trying, didn't really succeed. I think it just kind of became a hodgepodge of a bunch of different things, and I am really glad I had that experience, but it was definitely a little bit of a head scratcher at the end of it. And so I will say from that point, I shifted back to a Rebel, a different Rebel that was built into a bobber style, which was really, really interesting. Got to experience that for a few months. But then once that moved on, I actually took a little bit of a leave of absence for about a year and a half. So I finished up college, I moved on to my career, and I thought to myself, what would be a great opportunity for me would be to get reintroduced to the world of motorcycling. And I really kind of took it upon myself to consider a few different things, right? Reliability. I had spent majority of my time, like most beginner riders do, just wrenching on the thing because it never worked and the carbs were never in sync and nothing ever worked properly. And I just did not have the knowledge or the patience to do it, to tend to that. And so I just decided, you know what, fuel injection all the way, so we're going to try to go for a newer motorcycle. The other thing that I just wanted to kind of dive into in that regard when I was getting started with it, almost a second coming of getting interested again, was I just want to ride, but I'm not looking to do it very quickly. Because at that point, yes, I had been riding. I had had time on two wheels, but I really didn't fully understand everything because I spent half the time, like I said, trying to make sure everything worked correctly. So I went with a 300 CBR 2021, Honda CBR, and it was an absolute riot, the thing. I put a little slip-on exhaust on it from Yoshimura, which made it sound like a very angry swarm of bees, which, it was at the time kind of fun, but definitely a little bit noisy for sure. But that bike taught me a lot about riding. Ultimately, right, you're confined by speed limits, so there's really nowhere you can go if you're going to operate on the road where you're having a million horsepower is going to do you any good. The other is it changed my perspective on how I enjoyed riding. And so what does that kind of mean? Is that riding my moped and riding those subsequent carbureted motorcycles, I really didn't want to ride much faster than about 35 to 40 miles per hour just around town. Well, having a modern motorcycle with fuel injection and all the safety features, I did not want to do that. I found that the more I rode, the more I didn't want to be near anybody, and so it pushed me to go farther and farther away from my home and ride longer and longer distances on faster roads. So what's kind of my first snag that I ran into with that? One, well, the kind of obvious is power, right? Yes, technically that motorcycle can go 80 miles an hour, technically. However, I am not a small person, so that bike was definitely on the struggle bus when it was figuring that out. And so I let myself work around that. That's not a big deal because, I'm not a speed racer, like I said, but I am just trying to keep up with traffic and not just absolutely whack the throttle open the entire time. Great bike for the city speeds, not so much for the rural, main busy roads. So that was one thing. The next thing was the engine itself. So that was just a single cylinder. It was very buzzy. It was very agricultural, very much like an angry dirt bike, angry sort of swarm of bees, dirt bike type sound. It wasn't bad, but it was not pleasant per se. And so that was kind of my other shift. I thought, man, I would be really interested in finding myself with something that just sounded a little bit better, had a little bit more power, just to be able to get me around town. Because as I started to grow in my abilities to ride, I found, okay, the inability to accelerate is kind of hindering my experience a bit now. It took a while. It took, the better part of 2 years to really go, okay, I think I'm much more comfortable with this motorcycle. Anyone that rides a motorcycle like that, rides an entry-level bike and just gets rid of it in a couple months, I really, really hope that people revisit that, especially if you aren't doing any type of spirited riding and you're just cruising around town and you're just whacking the throttle open. I'll talk more about that later. But I realized, okay, I need a little bit more power. I like a little bit more refinement in the engine. And also, too, I think I'm going to start to pivot a little bit away from sort of the committed riding style to a little bit more relaxed. I thought that I was going to want the committed riding style all the way because it makes it a very aggressive experience, and I wanted that. However, I'm an adult and I have to pay bills, and the insurance on a bike with all the plastic fairings, it was crazy the differences, and that's just for me personally. But then I started to find that I did like having a little, kind of less is more type thing. And so with regards to all of that, that led me to my current motorcycle, and that is the Triumph Trident 660. It's 2024. It's up in my garage right now. Absolutely adore the thing. 3 cylinders, 80 horsepower, a little over 400 pounds, wet and ready to ride. And so that sort of combination with the refinement that I was looking for, and I think too from a very interesting brand, was just exactly what I was looking for. I'm absolutely in love with this motorcycle. It's given me all the right feels, and I really just cannot wait to continue to ride it. So why did I keep all of that dormant again? Like I said, the cars have been my whole life, absolutely. But the older I got, the more I realized that the actual cars that I wanted to experience were just way out of my league financially. And so it just wasn't giving me the right sort of I'm not going to say comfortable to have things like that. I was able to have my Challenger for a time, but then even then, it still scared me how often, like, if something breaks, it is so much more expensive than anything that I was used to, or even a set of tires was crazy expensive, that I just found myself, yes, I was driving it and enjoying it, but I was always nervous if something happened, to the point where I kind of didn't want to use it as much. And that really annoyed me, because when I buy things to use them, they get used, and because there is no reason to hold on to that for somebody else. And motorcycles became much more approachable, and too, a lot easier to store, a lot easier to insure, so on and so forth. So where does that kind of leave me with regards to into the future, right? Because right now I've got this motorcycle, I'm in love with it. I would never personally say that it's the bike I'll have forever, because I don't tend to own things for very long. I like to experience them to their fullest extent, and then I kind of move on. I think this style of motorcycle I absolutely want to have in my life. No question about it. You know, if maybe they evolve the Trident or they release a model that's similar, absolutely would jump on that, because this power to weight ratio, the looks, the feel, the weight, everything, it is exactly what I'm looking for, and I love that about it. So where does that kind of leave me, right? I think that for my situation and what I would kind of aim for as sort of a dream garage is having something kind of like this, you know, having the daily sort of fun, everyday usable. I think about it the same way I talk about cars, right? You have your daily driver, that could be your Porsche Cayenne, you know, S, right? And then you have your sort of lunatic car, right? Or your, in this case, lunatic motorcycle, where it's so over the top, it's so extreme, it's so compromised that you just make it special. And that's where I look at things like the MB Agusta, the Rush. I look at the Brutale. I mean, I look at all these different types of wild, you know, Ducati V2 Panigale, even any of the Street Fighters, because to me, those absolutely, you could use them technically, but it's just, they are special. They are truly special motorcycles. And I think that there is some sort of, when you reach that status of bike, you owe it to enjoy it. Absolutely. And this is all relative to my situation. Obviously someone else could, you know, look at that and think it's just a, you know, dime a dozen, but those things are special, and I would want to treat it as such. And then on the other side of the spectrum, I would look at sort of my, yes, I've got my daily, but I also kind of have my goofy, right? I've got my lunatic, I've got my goofy, and I've got my sensible, right? And so when I look at my goofy side, I look at things like the CF Moto Papio SS, right? A little tiny city bike that has, you know, it's 126cc, just tiny little thing, makes no power. It looks really cool, but it just is so, well, disposable ultimately for something like that. And I would really have a lot of fun with that, or tying it back into doing some sort of retro motorcycle, vintage motorcycle, where if it doesn't work that day, not a big deal. I look at old Ducati 916s, or even the old carbureted SV650s with the tubular frames, something that if it doesn't work, hey, you just grab the other ones and you move on. So, you know, that's really kind of, that's my story. You know, that's my up to speed on why I've gotten into motorcycles. And I really just felt at this point, it's been several years now. I've logged thousands of miles on two wheels. I've owned multiple motorcycles, and I've only done very brief touch-ons, not even on the channel, but on my social media from over the years. I've never formally stepped forward to talk about my passion for it. And so I'm really excited. I know, as much as I would absolutely love to get rid of this snow behind me here, I want to get back on two wheels. I don't have any camera gear to formally make a review video with, you know, the microphones and the suction cups and everything, but I hopefully here, as the channel continues to grow and I produce more content, there's a little bit more of an incentive to get out there, make some more content for it. And I'm just very excited to touch on that with you guys. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear how many of you are watching that like the things that I already produced, the watch videos, the car reviews, things of that nature, car discussions, and do motorcycles fit into your life as well? Do you have a motorcycle? And I'd also like to hear a little bit more on your thoughts around this particular format. I just felt like a discussion was a really nice way for me to just get the words out, get myself moving, get some content out to you guys, and just share what's going on. I think that is where YouTube is an amazing platform. Just to talk with you guys and share everything of what's going on has been a real pleasure. So I hope each and every one of you have a great rest of your day. And hey, stay awesome.